On what had been an ordinary night, she was sitting in front of her laptop reading comics when reality suddenly shattered. A blinding blue light burst from the screen, violently dragging her out of her quiet room and into a churning, spinning digital vortex. A system message flashed before her eyes. Password accepted. Resistance invalid. She woke up on a luxurious bed, dizzy and utterly confused. A worried middle-aged man called her Ariel and asked if she was all right. Panic instantly seized her throat. She had no idea who this man was, and when he claimed to be her father and frantically shouted for someone to fetch a doctor, her confusion only deepened. When she accidentally caught sight of her reflection, she saw a strange face and a head of long golden hair. In that instant, she understood the terrible truth. She had been transported into the world of a comic. A system notification confirmed her fear, telling her that she had become Ariel, a character in the mystery of the Duke house's downfall, and that the only way to return was to save House of Mariki and prevent the family's destruction. Time seemed to stop. The crushing reality finally sank in. She had become the villainess destined for a tragic end. She quickly sorted everything out. The man before her was her father, the Mariki Marquis, and it was his conflict with Duke Kakas that had ignited the beginning of their family's downfall. She hurriedly asked whether her father had already angered the Duke, and his shocked expression gave her the answer. She was too late. Just as her father tried to comfort her, she opened her mouth to warn him about what would happen in the future, but her voice suddenly caught in her throat. Time froze again, and a system warning appeared. Spoilers are strictly forbidden. Violators will be punished. She was trapped, forced to watch the tragedy unfold, unless she could find another way. Just as despair began to close in, a doctor entered the room, and she recognized him at once. He was no doctor at all, but the assassin who had used his position to murder the previous Duke. Without time to explain, she sprang off the bed and drove a savage kick into his chest, sending him crashing to the floor. She pinned him down, grabbed a letter opener, and with cold fury in her eyes, demanded to know who had sent him. But before he could speak, he bit off his own tongue and killed himself on the spot, taking the secret with him. Her father rushed to her side, but she calmly reassured him in a steady, composed voice, telling him she was no longer a child. She explained that the man had been an assassin and that from now on, he had to trust her without reservation. She led her father to a more secluded room and warned him that the mansion was full of spies. Her words were quickly proven true. A maid accidentally dropped a suspicious document. Ariel immediately questioned her in a cold voice. Even her father was shaken by the sudden change in her presence. He could see clearly that the girl before him was no longer the innocent daughter she used to be. After earning her father's trust, she laid out her desperate plan in the study. She had to break off her engagement to Prince Siebel. Her father was stunned, but she did not stop. She insisted that they also had to avoid clashing with a new Duke Kakas and transfer all of the family's assets abroad. She knew she could not explain all her reasons, so she could only beg her father to trust her. In the end, she persuaded him with a startling proposal. They would go apologize to Duke Kakas together. Her father agreed, saying she was the only daughter he truly cherished, and now he had no one else he could trust. When they arrived at the Duke's mansion, they were forced to wait outside. A maid deliberately spilled hot tea on Ariel's dress to test her reaction. Ariel's expression did not change. She had no intention of swallowing the insult and calmly struck back, pointing out that such behavior was a slight against an honored guest of the Duke's mansion. Caught in her own trap, the maid had no choice but to lower her head and apologize. Hidden in the shadows, Duke Kakas watched it all and became interested in the unexpected sharpness of the Marquis's daughter. At last, the Duke appeared. His cold gaze swept over the two of them. Ariel's father sincerely apologized for his part in the death of the former Duke. Then Ariel also spoke personally, earnestly asking for forgiveness. But the Duke remained unmoved and merely gave the cold order for them to leave. After they returned to the carriage, her father was furious at the Duke's arrogance, but Ariel soothed him, explaining that bowing their heads was their only way to survive. But her troubles were not over. She still had to stop her own future humiliation by breaking off her engagement to Prince Siebel. At the royal palace, the prince flew into a rage when she demanded the engagement be ended. Her father tried to mediate, but the prince arrogantly assumed that with the power of his family behind him, he could do as he pleased. Tired of the pointless back and forth, Ariel stepped forward and said with contempt that she had once thought him impressive, only to realize now that he was nothing more than an ordinary man relying on connections and background. She made it clear that she would never allow herself to be sacrificed for so-called political balance, and that this engagement would absolutely be dissolved. After a moment of surprise, the prince argued that they had to join forces to keep Duke Kakas' power in check. Ariel refused to yield and bluntly declared that she would never marry a man she did not love, while drinking to drown her sorrows. Ariel unexpectedly ran into a familiar girl face to face, Lottie, the heroine of the original story, whose family had been destroyed by Ariel's own hand. A new plan began to form in her mind. If Lottie's fate could be changed, perhaps the ending of her own family could be rewritten as well. When she approached the girl and quietly said that she knew the secret of her birth, the friendliness vanished from Lottie's face in an instant, replaced by cold vigilance. She drew a dagger, ready to kill Ariel the moment she became a threat. But Ariel did not panic in the slightest. She calmly stated the truth. Lottie was actually the daughter of a noble house, and more than that, Duke Kakas' cousin. Even when Lottie pressed the blade to her throat, Ariel merely told her to calm down and said that if she returned to the Duke's mansion, the tragic developments of the original story, such as her meeting Prince Siebel in this tavern, could all be avoided. She even produced a will proving Lottie's bloodline, showing that she truly knew everything. Seeing that Ariel seemed to be someone standing on Duke Kakas' side, Lottie finally lowered her guard and decided to reclaim the identity that belonged to her. Inside the magnificent Duke's mansion, Lottie presented the will along with a jade pendant left behind by her mother. Duke Kakas recognized the one-of-a-kind jade at a glance and immediately confirmed that she was indeed his uncle's daughter, welcoming her home with a gentle smile. Watching from not far away, Ariel looked on in satisfaction, believing she had successfully changed the course of the story away from tragedy. Accompanied by a servant from the Duke's mansion, Lottie returned to the tavern to gather her things. Ariel watched them leave and silently prayed that this would be enough to save her family. Meanwhile, inside the tavern, Prince Siebel, dressed in disguise, was drinking alone. As Lottie packed her belongings, a group of thugs began harassing her and grabbed her arm without letting go. She struggled fiercely, but one of them actually pulled a knife, and the situation was about to spiral out of control. Just then, Siebel suddenly stepped in, drawing her into the shelter of his arm and rebuking the thugs, saying that a pack of grown men surrounding and bullying a young girl was utterly disgraceful. They recognized the royal pendant on his chest and immediately fled in terror. Ariel stood on the stairs watching the scene, her heart sinking straight to the bottom as despair consumed her completely. She had clearly done everything she could to stop these two from meeting, yet fate had still found a way. Lottie looked up at the handsome man who had saved her and was completely captivated. Then Siebel turned his head, and his gaze landed directly on the place where Ariel was hiding. Ariel coldly demanded to know whether Prince Siebel had been following her. The prince immediately denied it, insisting it was only a coincidence. Standing beside him, Lottie asked whether they knew each other, but Ariel brushed it off lightly, saying they were little more than mere acquaintances. Panic swept over Ariel again. She absolutely could not let these two have any connection, because their fated romance would completely destroy all her plans. She made a snap decision, grabbed the prince by the arm, claimed she had urgent business to discuss with him, and forcibly dragged him away, leaving a bewildered Lottie behind. Once they reached a secluded garden, Siebel angrily shook her off. But Ariel's expression did not change as she once again repeated that she wanted to end the engagement. The prince scoffed at what he called her unreasonable demand, and she calmly shot back that the truly unreasonable one was the man refusing to let her go. Realizing that reasoning with him was useless, Ariel changed tactics and put on a pained, aggrieved look, pleading with him not to force a young girl into a loveless marriage. The act was so effective it nearly made even her want to gag. Yet the prince was not moved at all. He made no effort to hide his disgust for her performance and stated clearly that he had no intention whatsoever of ending the engagement. Watching him storm away, the look on Ariel's face turned completely cold. She knew what he truly wanted was her family's influence. If he refused to cooperate, then she would have no choice but to walk a more dangerous road. Back in the study, Ariel handed her father a book with bold words on the cover, Downfall Plan. She laid out her logic. As long as House of Mariki remained powerful, Prince Siebel would never agree to break the engagement. So they had to dismantle that power, step by step, according to a plan. Her father argued that the family's influence was too great to erase just like that. But Ariel proposed a brilliant idea. The foundation of noble status was money, so all they had to do was give all their money away. Not waste it on themselves, but donate it all to the people in need. That way, they could weaken the family's power while also winning the hearts of the common people, building a powerful shield against any political turmoil that might come later. She immediately began carrying out the plan, personally handing out supplies and money to grateful citizens. Before long, the crowd began loudly praising the Mariki Marquis. This strange wave of charity soon reached the ears of the immensely powerful Duke Kakas. A maid confirmed to him that Ariel was selling off the family's assets in order to fund these good deeds. Intrigued, Kakas ordered an investigation into House of Mariki's true intentions. His cousin Lottie heard Ariel's name and brought up their strange encounter, explaining that Ariel knew the secret of her hidden birth and had also been the one to suggest that she go to the Duke's mansion. That information only deepened Kakas's curiosity. He decided to see for himself what exactly this woman was plotting. Meanwhile, Ariel continued her charity work. As her plan progressed smoothly, her father's reputation rose with it. From a distance, Kakas watched her and noticed how unusually approachable she was for a noblewoman. But the peace of a donation event was shattered by a group of ruffians who shoved through the line. They snatched supplies while shoving the maids aside. Ariel stepped forward calmly to stop them and ordered them to line up like everyone else. They wailed that they had not eaten for days, so she cleverly replied that if they obediently waited in line, they could receive a little extra. They agreed with their mouths, but in the end, greed overwhelmed reason. They grabbed 5 large sacks and walked off without so much as a word of thanks. Kakas took in the entire scene. He acknowledged Ariel's courage, but he also saw how naive she was about the depth of human greed. Just as he had expected, that very night the same thugs cornered Ariel and her maid Laura in a dark alley. Waving knives, they demanded money. Ariel burned with anger and reminded them that she had already given them supplies, but they sneered and said what they wanted was enough money to live comfortably for years. Realizing she was badly outnumbered, she offered to give them all the money she had on her. But they mocked her, saying that amount was nowhere near enough. Left with no other choice, she made a bold gamble and told them to come home with her to get more. The leader seized her and pressed a knife to her throat, using her as a hostage. Yet Ariel remained remarkably calm, soothing both her terrified maid and the man holding her, telling them that once they reached the mansion, they would definitely get what they wanted. When they arrived at the Marquis's mansion, the thugs threatened Laura into silence and ordered her to fetch the money. But just then, Ariel's father appeared and sharply commanded them to release her at once. Panicking, the leader pressed the blade harder against Ariel's skin and warned him not to come any closer. At that moment, a voice suddenly cut through the chaos. It cursed them as a pack of idiots, and then something came flying through the air and instantly knocked the knife from the thug's hand. Duke Kakas had arrived. Without mercy, he kicked the thug to the ground, then turned and asked Ariel whether she was hurt. For a moment, Ariel was dazed by his strikingly handsome appearance, but she quickly thanked him for saving her. He only replied blandly that it was a coincidence, saying he had merely happened to be passing by, and reminded her to be more careful in the future. Ariel promised that she would personally visit to thank him properly another day, and he merely waved it off. Afterward, Ariel looked at the thug who had been captured, a sharp pain in her heart, and demanded to know why he had repaid her kindness with such enormous betrayal. Her father comforted her, warning her never to underestimate greed and promising that he would assign guards to her from now on. However, Ariel remained deeply suspicious of Duke Kakas's coincidental rescue and resolved to investigate him. But the next day, the moment she reached the Duke's mansion, a maid blocked her at the gate. That only confirmed her suspicions further. His appearance had definitely not been accidental. To get into the Duke's mansion, she decided to seek out the only person who could help her, Lottie. She found Lottie at a tavern and proposed a deal, asking her to help her enter the Duke's mansion. Lottie immediately turned hostile and accused Ariel of trying to use her to get close to her cousin. Driven into a corner, Ariel had no choice but to invent a highly convincing story. Blushing, she admitted that she had secretly admired Duke Kakas for a long time and desperately begged Lottie to give her a chance to see him. Lottie's heart softened, and she reluctantly agreed, on the condition that Ariel disguise herself. Then Lottie brought the veiled Ariel into the Duke's mansion, introducing her to everyone as a friend. And when Kakas questioned the strange outfit, Ariel could only timidly explain that she had pimples on her face. After the two of them walked off, Lottie even whispered to her that she must really like the Duke, and Ariel played her part flawlessly. But neither of them knew that Kakas was watching their retreating figures. A sly smile curved on his lips as he turned to the maid and said he had recognized Ariel from her scent long ago. Thoughtfully, he remarked that if she was willing to go to such lengths, she had to be after something bigger. Amused, he decided to play along with her little trick for the time being. Under the cover of a star-filled night, Ariel slipped into a grand mansion. She had only one goal in mind, to find the list her father had mentioned. Clutching a glowing gemstone for guidance, she quietly sneaked into the study. But her initial search turned up nothing. She could not help mocking herself for her stupidity. How could something that important possibly be left lying around so casually? Then suddenly, inspiration struck the desk drawer. It was where her father also often kept important documents. But just as her fingers touched the wooden drawer, an icy hand suddenly clamped around her wrist. She let out a startled scream and looked up to see a silver-haired man holding the gemstone that was now glowing. That man was Duke Kakas, and his eyes were filled with chilling anger. In a cold voice, he demanded to know what Miss Ariel was doing, disguised and appearing in his study in the middle of the night. Ariel stammered out a clumsy excuse, saying she had only gotten lost. But Kakas's sharp gaze had obviously already seen through her lie, and he warned her that if she kept deceiving him, he would show no mercy. Realizing that honesty was her only way out, she was just about to tell the truth when Kakas cut her off first, admitting that he had seen her outside the mansion gate the previous night. He confessed that he had followed her then because he suspected the thugs from the poor district would come looking for trouble, and the facts had proven his instinct correct. Ariel was stunned and hurriedly apologized for the misunderstanding. But the Duke immediately forced her into a new predicament. Why had she suddenly started doing charity work? Feeling that she had no road left to retreat on, Ariel tried to escape by saying that it was improper for a man and woman to be alone together. But the more she evaded him, the more interested he became. He bluntly stated that he would definitely uncover what exactly was going on in her head. The next day, Kakas's cousin Lottie came looking for someone and asked where her friend Ariel was. Kakas simply said that Ariel had already left on her own. Lottie immediately protested in irritation, saying Ariel could not possibly have left because she admired him so much. That new piece of information instantly caught Kakas's attention, and Lottie instantly regretted letting that slip. To turn the situation around, Kakas coldly told her she had been deceived. Ariel was nothing more than a little thief, and he had personally caught her sneaking into his study. Lottie was left shattered by this sudden betrayal. Meanwhile, at her charity banquet, Ariel caught sight of her fiancé, Prince Siebel. At that very moment, a furious Lottie stormed in, grabbed her, and called her a liar. Lottie angrily demanded to know why she had secretly sneaked into her cousin's house. Ariel desperately explained that it had only been a misunderstanding that had already been cleared up and that she had stolen nothing. But the situation worsened completely when Siebel suddenly revealed that he and Ariel were engaged. That fact dealt Lottie a heavy blow, and it also made Ariel instantly realize how terrible the whole thing looked. Knowing that her friend had feelings for the prince, she quickly withdrew and left. After she left, Lottie warned the deeply suspicious Siebel that Ariel had been lying all along. But Siebel calmly explained that their engagement was purely a political marriage, without the slightest trace of romantic feeling. Seeing a glimmer of hope, Lottie shyly asked whether he would break off the engagement. After making up her mind, she confessed that she had fallen in love with him at first sight. Blushing crimson with embarrassment over her bold confession, she turned to run, only for Siebel to stop her. He was deeply drawn to the brave, adorable honesty in her. Once he was alone, Siebel began to think about his own fate. On one side, an engagement bound by politics, and on the other, someone so passionate and sincere. Later, Lottie went to find Kakas and asked whether Ariel truly loved someone else, saying she had seen her with Prince Siebel. After Lottie confirmed the man's identity, Kakas's expression darkened at once. With that information in hand, Lottie went to find Ariel again. But after a tense round of apologies, Lottie still confessed her feelings for Prince Siebel and asked Ariel to step aside. To her surprise, Ariel was actually delighted and even revealed that she had long wanted to break off the engagement, but the prince had never agreed. The two immediately formed an alliance and joined forces toward the same goal. After returning to the mansion, Duke Kakas learned that Ariel's charity work had expanded into a free soup kitchen. He rejected the maid's suggestion of harshly interrogating her and decided on a subtler approach instead, joining her circle. He went to the soup kitchen, and Ariel was stunned by his sudden appearance. He even brought a briefcase stuffed with cash and said he wanted to take part in her work. Ariel was deeply suspicious of his motives, but she also knew she could not refuse the ultimate villain, so she could only reluctantly accept his generous funding. To test his resolve, she playfully told him to go clean the tables. Just as Duke Kakas was finding the whole thing amusing and was about to do it, a group of furious restaurant owners suddenly barged in, accusing Ariel's free kitchen of ruining their business. In the office, Ariel listened as they demanded that she start charging money. Before she could respond, Duke Kakas stepped in and offered to buy their shops for 10 times their value. But when they sneered at the idea of a down payment, Ariel calmly told them they could collect the rest from the Mariki Marquis, or more importantly, from Duke Kakas, because she revealed that the Duke was actually a major shareholder in the soup kitchen. Realizing they were completely outmatched, the shop owners immediately accepted the deal. Ariel then cleverly turned the situation around and gave all the credit to her father's kindness, further strengthening the family's reputation and making Duke Kakas suspect that she was laying the groundwork to win over the people. Afterward, Duke Kakas went to Prince Siebel and questioned the Mariki Marquis' sudden and unusual turn toward charity. The prince brushed it off, saying it was just another one of Ariel's impulsive whims. Then Duke Kakas abruptly changed the subject and asked about Lottie. Prince Siebel immediately became interested, asked to be introduced, and even admitted that he found talking to Lottie very enjoyable. Seeing that the prince seemed to have fallen for his cousin, Duke Kakas lied and said Prince Siebel had probably mistaken her for someone else, because Lottie supposedly had not left the house for several days, instantly cutting off any further questions. Lottie discovered that she had become a prisoner in her own home and was baffled as to why she was not allowed to go out. Her imposing cousin, Duke Kakas, told her that someone was trying to capture her and that she would only be safe if she stayed in the mansion. Lottie pressed him on who would do such a thing, but her pleas were ignored. The maid named Nancy only said that His Grace was doing this for her own good. Then she locked the door and stationed 2 guards outside. Lottie went nearly mad with anxiety, yanking desperately at the locked door and shouting that she had to get to the tavern. She urgently wanted to know who exactly was after her. Elsewhere, Duke Kakas told Nancy the truth. Lottie had fallen for Prince Siebel, who was already engaged, and he would never allow such a relationship. Even so, he ordered Nancy to keep a close watch on her for the next few days, adding that he was certain his fiancée Ariel was plotting something. Meanwhile, Ariel was keeping her father company. He lamented how much money they had spent lately and worried that the wealth their family had built up over generations would vanish so quickly. But Ariel reminded him that there was no turning back now. The family's decline was the only way to break off her engagement. Still, she was also starting to worry and admitted that Duke Kakas had been watching her closely lately, which meant he had no intention of sparing their family at all. He had even personally gone to the soup kitchen she was running, which was enough to show how much he cared about her father. Just then, a maid came to report that Miss Lottie had sent something over late at night. Ariel found it strange that Lottie had not come in person and had instead sent a maid. They opened the box and found a dress inside, but when they unfolded it, they discovered a crude drawing hidden within it. Ariel immediately deciphered the message. The drawing showed a girl dressed in Lottie's usual clothes trapped inside a mansion that looked exactly like the Duke's mansion. Lottie had been locked up and was asking for help. Her father sternly warned her not to interfere in their family's affairs. Ariel outwardly agreed, then that very night immediately began planning a rescue with Nancy. They quietly approached the Duke's mansion, and Nancy instructed Ariel that the moment she fired the crossbow bolt, Ariel was to run at once. Nancy then created a disturbance, drawing the guards into chasing after her. Once the entrance was clear, Ariel slipped into the mansion, her heart pounding as she searched for Lottie. She found 2 guards standing outside a heavily guarded door. Thinking fast, she fired another arrow and shattered a nearby vase, creating a second commotion. When the guards rushed over to investigate the sound, Ariel attacked from behind and knocked them both out with 2 clean blows. Privately, she thought the servants in the Duke's household were not very bright, then picked the lock. Startled by the noise, Lottie was overjoyed when she saw Ariel come in and urged her to hurry, since her cousin might return at any moment. The 2 of them quickly escaped. Ariel reassured Lottie that she was safe now and could hide at her shop for a few days first. But as they walked through the silent streets, they were suddenly surrounded by a group of vicious-looking men. Lottie wondered if her cousin had sent them, but Ariel knew that was not the case. The men unfurled a portrait, confirmed that Lottie was the target, then immediately grabbed her and covered her mouth. Ariel shouted at them to let her go, but when she rushed forward to stop them, another man struck her viciously from behind with a club, and she collapsed on the spot, unconscious. After the men dragged away the terrified Lottie, she was taken before Prince Siebel. He flew into a rage at his subordinates and demanded to know who had allowed them to treat her so roughly. He personally removed the cloth gag from her mouth and apologized repeatedly, explaining that he had only told them to find her, not kidnap her. His subordinates immediately lowered their heads as well and begged Miss Lottie for forgiveness. But Lottie was furious. She slapped his hand away and demanded to know whether he thought that just because of his high status, he could abduct people in broad daylight. She reminded him that he was Ariel's fiancé and that he had no right to treat either of them this way. She also demanded time to deal with the matter. Lottie firmly stated that his men had injured Ariel, so he ought to apologize to Ariel as well. Meanwhile, back at the Duke's mansion, Ariel, covered in blood and in a miserable state, burst inside and shrieked that she needed to see Duke Kakas. In a panic, she said that Lottie had been taken right in front of her by a group of men. She recalled that the men had even been carrying Lottie's portrait and had knocked her unconscious when she tried to stop them. Seeing that she was hurt and so badly shaken, Duke Kakas told her to calm down first and pulled her into his arms. He said that the top priority was to treat her wounds before anything else. Held in his embrace, Ariel froze for a moment and had to admit that he was actually quite handsome. He set her down on the sofa and called Nancy over to tend to her injuries. Then he personally took the medicine box and scolded her, saying that even though she was obviously so afraid of pain, she still kept throwing herself into trouble. Ariel retorted that Lottie was a friend who had helped her. As the Duke gently cleaned her wounds, she sucked in a breath from the pain. But she noticed that although his words were harsh, his movements were unexpectedly gentle. She quickly snapped herself out of it and reminded herself that her real goal was to save her family, not get distracted by this sort of thing. After thanking him, she tried to leave, but moved too quickly, stumbled, and fell straight into his arms, where he caught her perfectly. And just at that unbearably awkward moment, Lottie pushed open the door, saw the scene before her, and was so shocked her jaw nearly dropped. Duke Kakas calmly asked how she had escaped. Lottie said that Prince Siebel had taken her, which confirmed his suspicion and also explained why he had locked her up. Ariel, however, was utterly confused. That was until Duke Kakas explained that her fiancé, Prince Siebel, had fallen for Lottie. Ariel's face instantly lit up with a radiant smile. This was tremendous news. She realized that if the prince had fallen for someone else, then he would definitely agree to break off the engagement. Watching her burst with joy, Duke Kakas was momentarily stunned, completely unable to understand why she would be happy that her fiancé had changed his heart. Ariel said her father must be worried, then happily took her leave. After she left, Lottie teased Duke Kakas and asked if he had been moved by Ariel, only to be silenced at once by the cold look he gave her. After returning home, Ariel hummed cheerfully all the way and happily told her father that she had discovered Prince Siebel had fallen for someone else, meaning their plan to break off the engagement would succeed even sooner than expected. Carrying a shovel, Ariel walked into the forest with only one absurd goal in mind: digging a trap. Her maid Laura questioned the plan, but Ariel was full of confidence and explained that it was all for the sake of bringing two lovers together. She was convinced that Lottie and Prince Siebel had feelings for each other, and that with just a little push, they would realize their hearts. Seeing how determined her young lady was, Laura agreed to help, and Ariel insisted on digging alongside her so they could finish before dark and avoid being discovered. Meanwhile, Duke Kakas was reading when a maid interrupted him. She reported something strange. Someone had seen Ariel carrying a huge shovel into the forest. Intrigued by such odd behavior, the Duke decided to investigate in person. Under the moonlight, Ariel and Laura were admiring the deep pit trap they had finished digging. Ariel first had Laura climb out, then handed the shovel up before following after her. But just as Ariel began climbing out herself, the branch she was using for leverage suddenly snapped with a sharp crack. She screamed and fell back into the pit again, landing hard, and could only groan and complain about how terrible her luck was. Panicking, Laura asked what they should do, but Ariel calmly told her to find some sturdy vines to use as a rope. When Laura could not find any no matter how hard she looked, she became so anxious that she started crying. Instead, Ariel comforted her and told her to go back first and bring a proper, reliable rope. Laura promised she would return as fast as she could, crying out for help as she ran into the night. But she tripped over a tree root, crashed hard to the ground, and passed out on the spot. Sometime later, Duke Kakas appeared in the silent forest, guided by a sphere of magical light. He found an abandoned shovel and guessed it might belong to Ariel, confirming that the maid's report had been true. Just as he was wondering where she could have gone, he stepped in the wrong place, and the ground instantly gave way beneath him. He dropped straight into the very same pit. Ariel was startled by the sudden intrusion, and when she realized it was Duke Kakas, she was even more shocked into speechlessness. He casually dusted the dirt off himself and coolly asked why she was in a place like this. She snapped back that it was not as if she wanted to be there, but before she could finish, a sharp pain shot through her leg. After examining her ankle, the Duke told her that it was dislocated. He handed the glowing light orb to her and told her to think of something pleasant, then casually teased that the atmosphere was actually rather romantic, the two of them alone together in a pitch-black pit. Before Ariel could even react, he suddenly twisted her foot and with a horrifying crack, forced the joint back into place. She immediately let out a piercing scream, grabbed at him in shock and anger, and demanded to know what on earth he had just done. He calmly explained that he had merely set her dislocated ankle back in place. She complained that he should at least have warned her first. At that moment, she had genuinely thought he was about to kill her. The two then fell into an awkward silence, while Ariel panicked inwardly, terrified that he might realize this ridiculous giant pit was actually one she had dug herself. And then, of all times, a cold rain began to fall. To her surprise, the Duke looked as if he had actually fallen asleep. She gently nudged him awake and started worrying about what might have happened to Laura. He woke with a sneeze and reasoned that Laura had most likely met with some kind of accident, which meant no one would come to rescue them before dawn. Seizing the chance, Ariel asked why a Duke would come to such a deserted forest, but he merely closed his eyes and pretended to have fallen asleep again. A moment later, Ariel sneezed too and shivered from a cold. The Duke asked if she was cold, and she replied with sarcasm, asking what else it could possibly look like. Without another word, he took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. Ariel was moved by the unexpected gesture of kindness, yet also felt guilty that he himself would have to endure the cold. So she suggested that they share it to keep warm. He agreed, but only on the condition that she absolutely must not let anyone know that they had fallen into the pit together, and that no one could know they had shared a single coat. She reluctantly agreed, and the two of them huddled together against the cold rain while waiting for dawn. The next day, Laura finally arrived with help and pointed out the deep pit trapping her mistress. The rescuers were stunned to discover that it was not only Ariel in the pit, but Duke Kakas as well. and at that moment, he was holding her tightly in his arms as she trembled with fever. He picked her up, told her to hold on, and then climbed up the ladder. The moment he felt how burning hot her body was, his expression grew even grimmer, and he carried her straight to the clinic. Her father rushed out in a panic and was utterly shocked when he saw the scene. The Duke gently supported Ariel as he helped her take her medicine, while her father could only stare blankly, wondering when exactly those two had become so close. Only after confirming that she would recover did he take his leave. Later, Ariel woke up in her own bed, looking completely dazed. Her father immediately pressed her for the full story, asking how she had suddenly become so close with the Duke. In a panic, she denied any romantic feelings whatsoever and explained that it had all been an accident that happened while she was trying to pair the prince with someone else. She called Laura over to testify for her, and Laura explained that she had fallen and hit her head, which was why she had only managed to bring help the next day. Then Laura playfully told Ariel's father that the Duke was always going out of his way to bother her young lady, which badly startled Ariel. Elsewhere, Duke Kakas sat at his desk, deep in thought. At that moment, a maid handed him the guest list for a memorial banquet, and he gave a startling order. The entire house of Mariki must attend. The maid reminded him that the two houses were political enemies, but he said he had his own plan. He intended to use this opportunity to weaken their influence and secure freedom for himself. The maid could only guess that this unusual display of emotion on his part was probably related to Miss Ariel. The invitation was delivered to the Mariki Marquis household, leaving Ariel's father deeply suspicious of the Duke's motives. Ariel felt the same ominous sense of foreboding and believed there had to be some scheme behind it. That night, she decided she could not just sit and wait for disaster to fall. So she told Laura to cover for her while she secretly slipped out to find the person who might help her understand the Duke's plans, Lottie. She had her maid tell her father that she was feeling unwell and had already gone to bed, then headed out. Ariel hurried through the lavish corridors of Duke Kakas' mansion with only one urgent goal in mind: to find Lottie. At the thought that she might run into the Duke himself, her stomach clenched in fear, but she still forced herself to calm down and stay steady. Yet the moment she turned a corner, she slammed straight into a solid chest. Her worst fear had come true. The one standing before her was Duke Kakas himself. His gaze was calm and scrutinizing. Noticing how hurried she looked, he asked whether she had come to see him. She forced out a polite smile, said she was only there to see Lottie, and tried to slip past him. But he moved faster and grabbed her wrist in one swift motion, his voice carrying a hint of concern as he asked how well she had recovered. She pulled her arm back and said she was much better now and did not want to bring up what happened before. After throwing out a stiff excuse, she walked off directly, leaving him standing there with an unreadable smile as he wondered what new trick she was planning this time. Once she found Lottie, Ariel immediately launched into the damsel in distress performance she had prepared in advance, putting false tears in her eyes and claiming that her family was facing grave danger. Kind-hearted as ever, Lottie immediately agreed that if there was any way she could help, she would. Ariel told her that Duke Kakas had invited her entire family to the late Duke's memorial banquet, then deliberately heightened the atmosphere of fear and suspicion, implying that he meant to use the occasion to take revenge on her father. Lottie was only half convinced, believing that the Duke had actually been quite lenient already. He had even allowed Ariel to come and go freely from the Duke's mansion and had personally gone to inspect her charity work. None of that looked like the behavior of someone harboring hostility. But just as Lottie tried to soothe her, a cold voice suddenly sounded from behind them. Duke Kakas was standing there, his expression unreadable, and he had clearly heard their conversation from beginning to end. Before Ariel could even react, he ordered her to come with him and took her away, while Lottie waved goodbye from behind with what seemed a bit too much delight. Once outside, the Duke confronted her directly, confirming that he had heard her plea for help as well as her suspicions about his intentions. Anger gave Ariel the courage to challenge him, asking whether he could truly say he felt no resentment toward her father. The Duke merely replied calmly that political struggles were always cruel, and that he had never blamed her father, because the late Duke had already suffered from a long-standing heart condition. Ariel found it hard to believe him, but he cut her off at once and insisted that her entire family attend the memorial banquet, especially her. When she stubbornly demanded to know why, he pressed her back against a corridor pillar. Lowering his voice, he gripped her arm and revealed his trump card. If she did not attend, he would not help her break off the engagement. At the memorial banquet, the Mariki Marquis entered together with Ariel, immediately drawing shocked whispers from the other guests, because they all remembered that this Marquis was the very man who had driven the late Duke into a corner. An old earl named Henry openly questioned Duke Kakas, asking why he had invited his own rival. The Duke calmly replied that he had his own reasons. Then Duke Kakas turned his gaze to Ariel and invited her to dance. As they moved across the ballroom floor, he brought up her engagement, gesturing with his eyes toward Lottie, who was dancing with Prince Sibyl, and hinted that perhaps they could help bring that pair together. He then revealed his true purpose. Someone was plotting to drive him from power, and he wanted Ariel to become his ally, his partner in the political struggle to come. He also made it clear that his greatest rival was none other than Earl Henry. After the ball ended, Prince Sibyl approached Ariel, and she wasted no time planting the seeds of chaos. She told the prince that Lottie was actually Duke Kakas's cousin. The fact left him deeply shocked. She also urged him to use that knowledge to reconsider breaking off their engagement. On a dim balcony, Earl Henry gave orders to a maid named Nancy, telling her to keep a close watch on Ariel. He added meaningfully that after 12 years of service, the time had finally come for her to act. Meanwhile, Ariel, who urgently needed money to dissolve her engagement, agreed to meet a buyer interested in purchasing her townhouse. She brought her maid Laura to Lady Elsa's manor, a place with an eerie atmosphere and not a soul in sight. Though Laura felt deeply uneasy, Ariel still stepped inside, only to be immediately ambushed by a man wielding a club. Laura screamed for her to run and shove her away with all her strength, taking the savage blow in her place. Ariel was seized by another attacker and could only watch in terror as her maid collapsed unconscious to the floor. She struggled desperately, but a wooden club was raised high, about to knock her out. At that very moment, Lottie appeared at the doorway, startling the kidnappers in a panic and sending them fleeing in haste. With one of the captors in tow, Lottie entered the silent manor and found the injured Laura. After the maid regained consciousness, she gasped out a plea for Lottie to save her young lady, and only then did Lottie realize the horrifying truth. Ariel had been kidnapped. She hurried to find Duke Kakas, burst into his study, and delivered the dreadful news. A cold fury instantly spread across the Duke's face as he swore he would bring Ariel back safely and denounced the kidnappers as shameless scum. As he stormed off in rage, he ordered maid Nancy to look after Lottie. But as Nancy watched his retreating figure, tears streamed uncontrollably down her face. She whispered to herself that she had no choice, exposing both her loyalty to Earl Henry and the dark intentions she harbored toward the Duke. When Ariel came to, nausea churned inside her. Her vision was blurred, and her heart was full of confusion and fear. She discovered that her mouth had been gagged, her body bound with heavy chains, and that she was trapped inside a dusty, unfamiliar, ramshackle shack. Panic tightened around her throat as she desperately tried to remember what had happened and frantically searched for a way to escape. Meanwhile, the silver-haired Duke Kakas stood with a grim expression as a woman confirmed to him that Ariel had been taken away by 3 men. She suggested questioning Lady Elsa, but admitted that the woman had kept her mouth shut the entire time. Kakas coldly remarked that Elsa had rarely spoken at all since that dreadful day. He entered a room where the frail Lady Elsa was sitting. His appearance immediately put her maid on edge, and Kakas had no intention of exchanging pleasantries. In an icy voice, he demanded to know why her condition had deteriorated so badly. The maid explained that Lady Elsa had been refusing both food and medicine. But Elsa herself cut her off and told Kakas not to worry. With a meaningful smile, she asked whether the girl who had been abducted was someone important to him. Kakas dismissed the idea, claiming they were merely associates, but his cold facade clearly failed to deceive her. Elsa guessed that the kidnapping had most likely been carried out by people from Earl Henry's faction, then lightly reassured Kakas that they would not harm Ariel. Kakas's patience shattered at once, and when she admitted she had witnessed the entire kidnapping, his suspicion deepened rapidly, and he immediately demanded to know what she knew. She had seen everything, yet had done nothing to stop it. Kakas bluntly asked whether she had colluded with Earl Henry and deliberately lured Ariel into a trap. Elsa hurriedly feigned innocence, explaining that she had only wanted to discuss buying the townhouse. But Kakas let out a cold laugh and mocked her for being as selfish and cruel as ever, capable of doing nothing but standing by and watching. Her maid hurriedly defended her, saying Elsa had fainted from shock. But there was no repairing things now. Kakas said in disgust that he had heard enough and turned to leave. After he was gone, Elsa quietly gave her maid Mira a secret order. Her expression turned resolute as she swore that she would personally meet this Miss Ariel. His cousin stopped him outside, but Kakas angrily ordered her never to mention Elsa again. He told her to stop interfering, while he himself intended to find Earl Henry and confront him face to face in order to locate Ariel. As the two argued, they saw Mira hurrying away. Her flustered demeanor immediately aroused their suspicion. Kakas made a quick decision, telling his cousin to go find Earl Henry, while he himself followed the suspicious maid. Mira arrived at the very shack where Ariel was being held, only to be stopped by two guards. Calmly, she displayed Lady Elsa's crest and offered to bring the men a lavish meal, successfully persuading them to let her go inside and check on the prisoner. While the two men ate outside, she entered and found the bound Ariel. She removed the gag from Ariel's mouth and introduced herself as Lady Elsa's personal maid. The moment Ariel learned that this woman served Duke Kakas's adoptive mother, a chill ran down her spine. Alarm bells rang in her mind. She could not help wondering whether the food had been poisoned and whether this woman might be one of the people behind her kidnapping. When Ariel pressed her for the truth, Mira only spoke vaguely, then turned and left, leaving Ariel even more bewildered. Once outside, Mira let out a breath of relief, only to discover that the two guards had already been knocked unconscious. She called out toward the forest, saying that her lady had done all she could and that the rest would have to be handled personally by Lord Kakas. Only then did Kakas step out of the shadows, realizing that someone had deliberately led him here and beginning to wonder about Elsa's true intentions. He charged into the shack, and the moment Ariel saw him, relief washed over her. He quickly freed her from her restraints, but just as they were about to escape, the returning guards interrupted them. Trapped inside, Kakas grabbed an axe and smashed open the locked window, lifting Ariel out first. She begged him to flee with her, but the kidnappers were already rushing at him. He ordered her to run and promised he would come back for her. Kakas faced the thugs alone and even gave them a chance to leave, but they foolishly refused. He fought back fiercely, but he was soon outnumbered and forced to the ground. A club was raised high, ready to strike a fatal blow. At that critical instant, Ariel suddenly burst back in through the window and smashed the attacker from behind. Kakas stared at her in disbelief as she smoothly kicked another man away and told him that they could talk later, after they dealt with the enemy first. At last, a faint smile cracked his cold expression as he admitted that he had truly underestimated her. Fighting side by side, the two quickly beat the thugs senseless and completely turned the situation around through their perfectly coordinated attacks. Just as they steadied themselves in victory, Mira reappeared with reinforcements, which visibly irritated Kakas. She told them that Lady Elsa wished to see them. Kakas could not help wondering how she always seemed to know everything. They were brought before Elsa. She fussed over Kakas with concern, but he coldly rejected every word she said. Ever graceful, Ariel stepped in politely, thanked the lady for her help, and gently took her hand. Kakas immediately rebuked her for being too familiar, but Ariel calmly defended herself, saying she was only expressing gratitude. At last Kakas could bear no longer. He grabbed her and demanded to know whether she had never considered that Elsa might have orchestrated the entire kidnapping herself. But Ariel coolly pointed out that the real culprits had already been captured, hadn't they? Infuriated, Kakas ordered Mira to take Ariel back to her room first. Once they were alone, the anger he had suppressed for so long finally exploded, and he demanded to know why Elsa had first imprisoned Ariel only to send Mira to rescue her. Elsa begged him to believe her, saying she would never harm him, and reminded him that she was the one who had raised him. Those words became the final straw for Kakas. He roared that she had raised him only to steal his mother's place, calling her his enemy and the woman responsible for his mother's death. Elsa denied it all, but Kakas shouted that he had seen it with his own eyes. The memory had poisoned him for years, corroding his soul all this time. Pure horror gradually appeared on Elsa's face as she finally realized a terrible truth. He had been there that day as well. In Duke Kakas' mind, a tense memory surfaced. Many years ago, his father had confronted a woman named Elsa and coldly pointed out that she clearly had not expected him to catch her. Past and present overlapped, carrying him back to a day when he was only 10 years old. At that time, he had been playing hide-and-seek with his mother, Elizabeth. With a gentle smile, she found him and softly called his name. But their game ended in tragedy. She suddenly cried out, clutching her abdomen, and collapsed in agony. Lady Elsa rushed to her side, but was already too late. With her final breath, Elizabeth begged her son to live on no matter what, then closed her eyes forever. Afterward, Elsa promised the dying woman that she would raise the child well. Young Kakas could only stand frozen in place, his body paralyzed by shock, a silent scream trapped deep inside his chest. When he finally regained the ability to move, he stumbled toward his mother's body, already gone cold. The tragedy completely shattered his world. Afterward, his father introduced Elsa as his new mother, in a cold tone that allowed no refusal. Though overwhelmed with grief, a seed of suspicion was planted in the boy's heart. He was certain that Elsa was connected to his mother's death, and he swore that one day he would uncover the truth. On the surface, he numbly obeyed and called that strange woman mother. As the years passed, the boy grew into an 18-year-old duke, yet the hatred in his heart continued to churn beneath the surface. His suspicions were constantly deepened by the gossip of the maids. They whispered in private that Elsa had murdered the former duchess in order to elevate her own status. For years he endured it all for one purpose only, to avenge his mother, and he swore he would never forgive that woman. The moment his father died, the time for his revenge had finally come. Facing Elsa, who feigned grief, Kakas spoke in a chilling voice and told her that her shield was gone now, and that no one could save her anymore. The fury he had buried for years finally erupted. He seized her by the throat and accused her of murdering his mother. Through tears, Elsa denied it and even turned the challenge back on him, telling him that if he truly believed she was guilty, then he should kill her. Kakas drew his sword, its gleaming blade seeming to hum with his rage as he pointed it directly at her throat. But in the end, he hesitated. His heart screamed in madness, hating himself for being unable to kill the person he despised most in the world. At last he hurled the sword away. His revenge went unfulfilled, and he merely exiled her to a decaying estate, ordering her never to appear before him again. With her pretense completely broken, Elsa instead sneered at him in mockery, coldly saying that he had believed she was a murderer ever since he was 10, and that all her years of gentle care had meant nothing. She even taunted him, saying that if not for his father's protection, she would have died by his hand long ago. Just as a maid rushed to her side and rebuked Kakas for being too cruel, another voice cut through the tension. Ariel was standing at the top of the stairs. Although she had promised not to speak of what she had overheard, she had questions of her own. She pointed out one extremely suspicious fact. Lady Elsa's personal maid had been able to enter the place where she was imprisoned. Then she raised the final fatal question. How exactly had Elsa known where she was being held? Backed into a corner, Elsa faced Ariel's continued questioning. Ariel bluntly asked whether she had been involved romantically with the kidnappers. Kakas immediately focused in as well, cutting off Elsa's evasions and forcing her to answer directly. At that moment, his cousin Lottie rushed in and announced that she had uncovered everything. The kidnappers were all Earl Henry's men. Then the final devastating truth was revealed. Earl Henry and Elsa were lovers. The news struck like a blow, leaving Elsa so shocked that she staggered backward. At last, all the pieces came together in Kakas's mind, and his fury rose to a terrifying height unlike anything before. He became convinced that Elsa must have conspired with Henry back then to murder his mother. He seized her by the throat once more and demanded to know what she had really been planning. But the maid Mira suddenly dropped to her knees at his feet and tearfully confessed that the only person responsible for Elizabeth's death was Henry, and that Elsa had known nothing about it. Kakas slowly loosened his hand, his mind reeling. Elsa finally admitted her own part in it. She said that his mother had discovered her relationship with Henry, along with Henry's dangerous ambitions. Kakas darkly finished the thought for her, so Henry had silenced his mother. Elsa gave a faint nod. That was all the confirmation he needed. A hoarse growl full of bone-deep hatred burst from Kakas's throat as he swore he would kill Henry. Ariel immediately rushed to his side, grabbed his arm, and desperately urged him to calm down, reminding him that Henry had been building his power for more than 10 years, and that rushing in recklessly would be suicide. Kakas barely suppressed his rage and turned to demand of Elsa why she had married his father. She answered that it had been for the sake of conveniently monitoring Henry's movements, though now she regretted it beyond measure. But Kakas only told her coldly that no matter how she explained it, she still bore responsibility for his mother's death. Ignoring Lottie's plea not to let himself be shaken, Kakas turned and rushed out, ordering everyone not to follow him. Ariel chased him into the garden, caught hold of him, and begged him not to act on impulse. But he shouted angrily that it was Henry who had killed his mother. With tears in her eyes, Ariel said she knew that, but she could not bear the thought of something happening to him. She told him that he was a precious friend to her. Those words pierced through his rage, and a strange, bitter emotion filled his chest. Seeing how distressed she was, he finally, with reluctance, agreed not to act rashly. Ariel promised that she would become his strength, but he refused to let her be dragged into danger. She did not yield in the slightest, saying that she was not afraid, and that since Henry had already set his sights on her, she needed to know why. Later, Ariel returned to her father and put on a performance to win his support. Through tearful eyes, she described how Duke Kakas had risked his life to save her from the kidnappers, and made it clear that those men had belonged to Earl Henry. Her father flew into a rage at once, unable to tolerate the fact that Henry had dared to lay hands on his daughter. Ariel then went on praising Kakas as reliable and trustworthy. Seeing his daughter's obvious feelings for the Duke, he finally gave up his neutral position and swore to stand with Kakas against Henry. Later, Lottie came to see Ariel and told her that Earl Henry was now trying to use her to win Prince Sibyl over to his side. That development drove Kakas into a state of despair. He shut himself away. Ariel felt wave after wave of pain in her heart, as though she could sense his frustration. At last, when Kakas appeared again, he announced to Lottie that he was going to the royal palace, and his purpose was even more shocking. He intended to ask Prince Sibyl to dissolve Ariel's engagement. The moment he turned around after saying it, he saw Ariel standing right behind him. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she asked him why he would do such a thing. Ariel hurried after Duke Kakas and demanded to know why he was going to speak to the prince about ending her engagement. Questions swirled in her mind, and she even wondered whether he meant to break off his own engagement with the prince's sister first, only to turn around and marry Lottie instead. Kakas's gaze turned icy as he asked whether she truly thought he was that kind of man. He coldly denied that he would use such despicable methods, and reminded her that Lottie was his cherished cousin. His true purpose was to protect Lottie from being used by Earl Henry, and, more importantly, to keep Ariel away from danger. The answer left Ariel stunned. She had never imagined that he worried so much about her too. Kakas took her hand, warned her never to underestimate their enemy, and urged her not to get involved any further. Only then did she softly agree. Afterward, Kakas went to see Prince Sibyl and confirmed that he wanted the engagement to be dissolved for the time being, but he also made it clear that what happened afterward would depend entirely on the prince's actions. Soon after, Lottie arrived and was surprised to find the two of them together, but Sibyl quickly welcomed her with a smile and said it had all been a misunderstanding. The prince then had Ariel summoned as well. Ariel was equally surprised to see everyone gathered there. At last, Sibyl spoke to her directly, admitted that this had long been what she wanted, and formally agreed to dissolve their engagement. A strange emptiness instantly filled Ariel's heart. She had thought she had wanted this moment all along, but now that it had truly come, she felt no joy whatsoever. It slowly dawned on her that the prince had only agreed because he had extracted some promise from Duke Kakas. Kakas led her outside, and she immediately pressed him on what exactly he had said. With a faint smile, he explained that what the prince had always wanted was the political support behind her family, and that he himself could provide that just as well. In that moment, Ariel's understanding of him completely collapsed. She had thought he was an ambitious man who cared only for power, but now he was willing to place himself in that position for their sake. The next day, a radiant Ariel quietly approached Lottie in the garden and playfully covered her eyes from behind. She first told Lottie that her engagement to the prince had now been officially dissolved in public. Then she stepped aside, revealing Prince Siebel holding a bouquet of roses and ready to confess his feelings. Lottie instantly blushed bright red and even lamented that she had not dressed up properly today. When the prince asked her to spend the rest of her life with him, Lottie joyfully agreed, and the two shared a tender kiss. Watching from the side, Ariel's heart overflowed with happiness for her friend, and she silently swore that no matter what happened next, she would protect their smiles. But the peace was soon shattered when a maid came to report that Earl Henry had arrived. Kakas's face darkened at once, stunned that the news had spread so quickly. The Earl calmly offered Lottie his congratulations. Lottie was surprised that he already knew, but he merely said lightly that it was already public knowledge. He then said he wanted to speak privately with the prince and Lottie and led them outside. Watching the scene with mounting anxiety, Ariel looked on while Kakas reassured her that the old fox truly could not wait to make his move and that, for the moment, Lottie was still safe. Right by the pond, Earl Henry praised Lottie's engagement, but Lottie coldly told him she would never become a pawn in his game. He seized her arm, his expression turning sinister as he warned her to think about her parents. He took out a ring, a keepsake left behind by her father, with her name engraved on it. Then he dealt her an even heavier blow. Her father's death had not been an accident. He spun a tale of betrayal, claiming that Duke Kakas's late father had personally orchestrated the murder in order to seize power. Lottie screamed at him to shut up. Her mind was in chaos, yet she still refused to let him manipulate her. She declared that Kakas had always treated her well, and no matter what his father might have done in the past, her loyalty to Kakas would never waver. That night, a furious Earl Henry plotted in the forest, enraged that his attempt to drive a wedge between them had failed. But the maid proposed a new target, Ariel. In a hushed voice, she fabricated another lie, claiming that the broken engagement had actually been caused by Ariel's own feelings, and that this was the weakness they could exploit. Malice glinted in the Earl's eyes as a new plan took shape. They would make Ariel believe that everything had been arranged by Duke Kakas alone, with the sole purpose of seizing her family's power. Meanwhile, Ariel walked down the corridor, her heart full of gratitude toward Duke Kakas and relief for her family's future. However, her peace was soon shattered. She accidentally overheard the maid speaking with the Duke, and heard the maid confirm that with this new marriage alliance, the support of House Mariki would be secured. If her father refused to cooperate, the maid would get rid of her entire family. Those words hit Ariel like a crushing blow. So she had been nothing more than a pawn, and Duke Kakas was even planning to kill her family. Panic swallowed her in an instant, and she finally realized that the man she had only just begun to trust had such a terrifying true face. Horrified, she fled and burst into her father's study. In a panic, she told her father they had to flee at once. Choking with sobs, she confessed that she had been deceived, and that if they resisted, Duke Kakas would kill them all. Just as her father was trying to find a way to let her escape alone, a calm voice came from the doorway. It was Duke Kakas, holding a bottle of wine. Wearing a gentle smile, he said it sounded as though they had just been talking about him. But Ariel could only force out an awkward smile and invite him in, her heart pounding wildly with fear. Her father nervously explained that she was simply overwhelmed with happiness, but Duke Kakas cut straight through the tense atmosphere and announced why he had come. He wanted to marry Ariel. Ariel stared at him in horror, feeling that this was the final checkmate in his twisted game. He stepped closer and told her that he had long since decided she was the woman most suited to him. Desperately trying to refuse, she belittled her family's influence and accused him of wanting to marry her, only for political gain. Duke Kakas merely looked at her and said no, then dropped to one knee, opened a ring box, and proposed to her.